苏州玉雕历史悠久，可追溯至5、6千年前的良渚文化时期。苏州玉雕在世界上享有很高的声誉。新苏州人雕刻家安大陆从英国远赴东方古都，成为苏漂，只为学习苏州玉雕艺术的空灵、飘逸、细腻和精巧。
My name is Andrew Andalu. I'm an Englishman. I come from London and I came to China to learn to carve jade. Before I came to China, I was a reporter, a journalist for the BBC. It's a huge leap from being a journalist reporting on news and facts to become a creative artist. And many people wonder, how on earth did you go from being one thing in London to another thing in China? What this great leap meant to me was everything. It was my dream. It was a long time in coming. I was quite happy in London. I had a good job. I had a great house. I had a lovely car. And most people thought I had a great life. But I was unhappy. I had been told that you need 3 things in life to be content, to be happy. You need to be living where you want to be living. You need to be with the people you want to be with, and you need to be doing what you want to be doing. And I just didn't want to be a journalist anymore. I didn't want to live in London anymore. And I wasn't content with the people that I was with. At the same time, my family had problems, my mother was ill, and I knew I couldn't leave. I had to look after my mother. My mother had always looked after me, and as she grew older, I had to look after her. Then one day, on my final day for the BBC, I was covering a story in Asia and my mother died and I wasn't by her side. It's one of my eternal regrets that I wasn't with her in her final moments. And it was at that moment that I realized I had to give up what I was doing in London. I had to give up a job I didn't want to do anymore. I had to move from a place I no longer wanted to live at, and I had to follow my dream. And my dream was to carve jade in China. How did I come to this? 2 or 3 years before this, I'd been so fed up with my job, I'd taken a sabbatical, I'd taken time off, I'd gone abroad, I'd gone to Thailand, I'd gone to relax, to write a book, to have a great time and to consider what to do with my life. And it was there that I fell in love with jade. One day, after 4 months in Thailand, up in the north of the country, I was visiting a temple with a friend, and on the way back, I heard this noise in the distance, like of machinery. I didn't know what it was, and I took a place off the beaten track, and I went to this little factory, and it was a jade factory where they were carving Buddhas. I'd never knew anything about jade. I'd never heard of jade. Well, I'd heard of jade, but it's something that was in museums. It was something from the past. It wasn't living, it wasn't new. And I went inside and I saw these people carving jade. I went to a gallery and I saw beautiful pieces of jade carved into Buddhas and Guanyins, fish, all sorts of things. And the first thing I did was I said, I'd like to look at that piece of jade. And as soon as it touched my hand, I fell in love with it. It spoke to my heart, it sang to my heart. And from that moment on, I was in love with jade. I started to collect books about jade. I started to buy pieces of jade. And I knew that in my heart, what I wanted to do was go to the home of jade, to China, and learn to carve it. And it wasn't until my mother died, it wasn't until she passed, that I was free to do what I want. My last day at the BBC was the day that she passed on and she went to heaven. And from that moment on, I worked towards moving to China, finding someone to teach me to carve jade and following my dream. I decided that I was going to travel to China. I was going to China to learn to carve jade. So with my suitcase in one hand and my ignorance in another, I got on a plane, went to Shanghai, got on a train, travelled to Suzhou, and I got the shock of my life. My dream, I thought I would sit in a walled garden with an old wise master with a beard and a moustache, and we would drink tea and we would discuss the finer points of jade. I'd heard that Suzhou was the Venice of the East, a beautiful, beautiful city full of canals, full of culture, and it was a centre, a place where great jade carving took place. But for an ignorant foreigner like me, who didn't speak a word of Chinese except for ni hao and xie xie ni, it wasn't like that. It took me months just to learn enough of the language to start asking where people carve jade, to try to find the place where everybody collected, where they were all gathered and they were all carving together. It took me 4 or 5 months to learn enough Chinese to ask where they carved jade, and once I found it, I was in heaven. Hundreds, thousands of carvers, all in one area, lots of little workshops, and all of them carving jade. I knocked on every door, every day, week after week, month after month, and eventually a very kind man agreed to teach me to carve.